Yes.
Yeah.
But our next speaker has his perspectives, because the panel is on perspectives, no? And will share with us his opinion of spiritual values.
Spiritual values.
Yes. And comparative, no?
Yes, comparative theology. And,
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. And I'd like to begin by expressing my thanks to Professor Dan Kitsoyu and Ms. Domran for such an event through which we are able to discuss an important topic for today's globalized world and interested all of us, that is spirituality. And I also thank to Professor Zvatelli for his discussion and presentation. Thank you. And I hope to be able to contribute to these events by bringing comparative theology as a way, as an approach to spirituality and to our discussion. And comparative theology is a developing field of theology that is interested and concerned with religious diversity and interreligious interactions. So, I have two starting points that I would like to put before us. And the first one is the global problems that all human beings are facing today, and it ranges from religious and spiritual drift, as Professor Osman Bülent said. I like that vocabulary. And we have a religious-driven violence in our world, the crisis of refugees, and the loss of democracy and the loss of values, racism, and bias, oppression, and exclusion. And I think all of these concerns us as human beings in all over the world, and I think we should be, and we have to be concerned about these things. And the second starting point is that I would like to put before us is the common religious problems. That is, spirituality is increasingly divorcing from religions, and today, with the effect of individualism, as you know, we have a common understanding that is, for example, especially younger generations say, younger people, that I am spiritual but not religious. And that brings my discussion to comparative theology, and I find comparative theology as a response to this separation between religions or religious traditions and spirituality. So, in my field of study, actually, we see religious diversity as a reason for the separation of the divorce between spirituality and religion. And there are two basic approaches to religious diversity. If we see religious diversity to some extent as a problem, it will lead us conflict among religions, and we experienced this for centuries. But if we see religious diversity as an opportunity that is going to lead us enrichment and new pathways in deepening our spiritualities. And so I am offering a comparative theology as a way to deal with this distinction between spirituality and religious traditions, and make a meaningful comparison between traditions based on mostly similarities and find some rich understandings, spiritual understandings in our lives. And comparative theology also involves not only spirituality but also religious learning. As you know, we are not discussing about the old ways of learning, such as discernment, contemplation, you know, some religious terms, some ways of learning things. And today we have new media which deep changes in how we learn or we don't learn. And we are able to find much information about other traditions, even in our own traditions. But today we are more concerned about post videos and images. Images and videos matters more. And so the question is, how do we convey our values and teach and learn spiritualities in our cultures and convey it to our new generations? My own personal journey has given me the opportunity to learn and actually practice comparative theology. And in religious studies, actually academically practicing something is usually very hard, because we always talk about the theory, but comparative theology is actually about practicing. So you need to find two familiar to you, to the practitioner, two familiar traditions, and find some common themes or differences depending on the preferences, and eventually find some insights that lead to a new understanding or deepening your own understanding in your own tradition. I'm going to give a description of comparative theology by Francis X. Coligny, who is a leading theologian and widely recognized as the founder of the comparative theology today. And he says, comparative theology is acts of faith-seeking understanding which are rooted in a particular faith tradition, but which, from that foundation, venture into learning from one or more other faith traditions. This learning is done for the sake of new theological insights that are indebted to the newly encountered tradition as well as the home tradition. So, if I should give an example about this, for example, as a Muslim myself, when I look at some cultural and religious understandings of Romanian people, particularly, and specifically, not the whole Christianity or the whole European culture, but specifically and particularly Romanian culture, and find some similar ideas. Let's say, for example, the value of the praying beads, for example, in Romanian culture, then I can compare it with my own cultural understanding of prayer beads in Islam, specifically and particularly in Turkish Islamic tradition. Then after a comparison which is in comparative theology reflective and contemplative, I can see the different similarities and differences, and from that point I can improve my understanding of praying beads in my own culture. the key point here is that as the practitioner of this field, I do not give any meaning to the praying beads in Romanian culture, but my own understanding. So, the point is, and actually the distinction between comparative theology from other fields of religious studies, for example, the theologies of religions, that, or the old form of comparative religion field, that the practitioner technically never gives a meaning to the compared thing in the other tradition. It's all about your own tradition. However, there are two ways to make a comparative theology today, and one is called confessional theology and the other one is meta-confessional theology. I described the confessional theology so far because we are talking about specific religious traditions and their understanding of particular things, themes, or items. But in meta-confessional approach, which is usually described as the philosophical approach to comparative theology, I think you are very interested in it. And that, you know, in the confessional way, in a religious way, in other words, the comparativist is rooted in his own tradition or her tradition. So, the truth, the understanding of truth, for example, in my case, it is Islamic truth. So, I do not leave my own religious commitment and I am able to practice comparative theology as a Turkish Muslim person, an academician, as a believer, and it's not affecting my results. You know, usually in the academia, we are sacrificing many things for the sake of objectivity. And this is not the sacrifice of objectivity now, but as I said, you are not giving any value other than their own values in other traditions. You are working on your own understanding inside your own tradition. But in meta-confessional approach, although you can start with the truth claim of any specific religion, for example, Orthodox Christianity, let's say you are talking about the importance of, again, the praying beads in Orthodox Romanian Christianity, but when you reach to your conclusions, let's say you are talking about how important the praying beads in Romanian culture, you can reach to a conclusion that the praying beads are important in other religions, regardless of what you believe in Romanian Orthodox faith. So, in comparative theology, actually the starting point and the identity of the comparative theologian is very important. Based on this identity and starting point, you reach different conclusions. But eventually, I prefer to do it as a confessional way, in a way in which I am trying to find similar ideas, items, themes in another tradition and venture into that tradition, trying to understand how, let's say, a Romanian Christian person believes in a certain thing that has also a value in my own culture, so that from the information, from the richness I received from a Romanian heritage, gives intensification in my own understanding of a certain theme in my own Turkish cultural understanding.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
I'll say some words about Ahmet Tașkin because he is illustrating this topic with his life, because he is from Cappadocia, and he told me about the Sufi groups in Cappadocia who are searching for a path, but evoking some of the primary Christianity figures, like the three hierarchs. Very interesting, yes. Also, he had some studies in Boston, so they have together a connection.
Yes.
He is trained in American spirituality, American academia. He's from Cappadocia. He's specialist in Ephes.
Yes.
And Ephes is the place of so many levels of history, of culture, of different spiritualities now. So to be expert in this place means to do comparative theology, comparative thinking, and to have this as your way of life, not just a theoretical attitude. And Ahmet told me yesterday that he discovered Romania in an unexpected way. The Romanians to be very close to his way of emotions, of thinking, and so on. So this is the most important part of this kind of conferences, to discover the other, cultural other, no? And spiritual values are embodied in us. We are, and Professor Bilen raised these very interesting ideas that we have a kind of mixture in us, and we have to learn from the other way of expressing or perceiving, no? So I think this is the purpose of this conference, to try to understand a little more about the others, and as you said, to enrich our experience, not to try to be what we are not, to be something else, somebody else. Thank you very much, Ahmet. And of course, we will continue our field research together in Turkey, in Romania, about beads, about praying beads, and about some other things. And of course, Professor Osman and some others, and Tony will join this kind of development.